Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thank you so much for being here today. We're going to go through the 6 caregiving stages, which is a concept that I initially developed in 1997. That was the first iteration. It has taken many different, well, I guess it's always been the same in terms of its foundation, but the insights around the 6 stages have really evolved since I initially developed it. I asked for feedback after I put out the first iteration of the concept and then continued to receive feedback. And then when I was caring for my parents, I really challenged myself to think through what's the stage that I'm in? How does it feel? And how relevant is the description of the stages in my concept to my personal experience? So I tried to challenge myself with feedback and then with my own personal experience. And for those of you who are joining me live, feel free to share any questions, insights in the chat room. It's always great to hear from those who are attending live. I'd like to remind everyone a few things about the personal caregiving experience. It's not location-based, meaning it doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter where your caree lives. It's an emotional experience. The impact is on our emotions. And I like to remind family caregivers of this because oftentimes they'll say, well, I don't live with my caree, so it can't be that bad. So should I reach out to get support? Yes, because the impact is on our emotions. It's not about where we live, it's about the experience of the emotional toll. And I also like to remind us that we're really looking to connect to support that understands the impact of our experience. And I saw this happen in a chat room. I had an online community that I launched in 96, and I managed that online community until I sold it to focus on training programs in 2020. And when I owned and managed the online community, we had chats 3 times a day, 8 a.m., 1 p.m., 8 p.m. And it was a Saturday afternoon, and a new member had joined our community, and I was connecting with her, and she said, please introduce me to someone who's caring for their spouse who has stage 4 colon cancer. I said, I will do my best to make that connection for you. In the meantime, we have a chat going on. Why not drop in and connect with some of our members? We had another member in the chat room. Her name was Sharon. Sharon introduced herself to the new member, and they just started chit-chatting, exchanging interesting information about each other. And what they learned is they shared the same impact of their caregiving experience, and that was they could no longer travel in their RVs with their husband. Sharon was caring for her husband who was diagnosed with dementia. So even though the new member wanted to connect with someone who had the same disease process as her husband, they connected over the impact of the experience. And that was they could no longer travel. In particular, they could no longer travel in RVs. So they talked about selling the RV, what it was like after they sold the RV. They talked about where they used to store their RVs. It was amazing to see that connection, which just really reminds me, we want to connect with someone who understands the impact. And that person might be someone who's 50 years older than us, or live in a completely different part of the country, or be caring for someone in a different disease process. But the impact is how we connect to support. In addition, I'm going to share this concept with the goal for you to take what works for you. I want this to be a fluid, flexible guide, which means you pull out of it what is helpful. Each stage has a keyword, and each stage also has stumbles and steadies. It's this idea that no one goes through this experience without having a couple trips. And it's this idea that we're going to stumble, but there's a steady for every stumble. I presented this concept last week in person at a caregiving conference, and I connected with the organizers of the conference the day before. One of the organizers said, "Well, you must know everything. You must be an expert." I thought, oh my gosh, I had lots of stumbles when I was caring for my parents. And it's also a good reminder that we are an expert in our own personal caregiving experience. No one knows it better than you. No one understands your carees better than you. And it's impossible to go through this experience without having some stumbles. And that's why we talk about steadies. One thing I also want to mention is the term caree. We use that term instead of care recipient and instead of loved one. When I started working with family caregivers, I was lucky enough to connect to a mentor. And this was 1993, 1994. And she was really gracious about introducing me to others who were passionate about serving family caregivers. And we were driving to a networking meeting, and I said something like, well, when we're caring for a loved one, I thought she was gonna slam on the brakes. She was just appalled. And she said to me, use the term care recipient, because sometimes we care for a family member who isn't a loved one. And we really want to be respectful of all the relationships encompassed within a caregiving experience. So I pivoted. We started using the term care recipient. And then in 2010, one of the bloggers on my online community said, I feel really funny calling my mom my care recipient. Can't we think of another term? I thought, yeah, why can't we think of another term? So we had a contest and people submitted their ideas, and then we voted. And that one is caree, and that's why we use the term caree. Okay, so let's talk about the first stage. And this is the expectant caregiver. And when I first created the concept, I had this stage and I got a lot of pushback. No one thinks of them as an expectant caregiver. No one identifies as this. I said, it doesn't matter. We are all expectant caregivers. And even if just a few of us have that insight, it changes things dramatically. Because then we start to have different conversations with individuals. We inspire others to have different kinds of conversations with others. We are all expectant caregivers, regardless of how many previous caregiving experiences we've had and how old we are. We are all expectant caregivers. And the key word in this stage is to ask. We're really thinking through, what do I want to know about the people in my life? And our purpose is to prepare. So when we think about asking questions, we want to ask future carees questions about their priorities, their values, their goals. We also want to ask questions of ourselves. What stresses me out? What worries me? What helps me cope? What keeps me on track when I'm stressed out but have to achieve a goal or meet a deadline? And then certainly this understanding of there's healthcare professionals already involved. We want to ask questions of them about our caree or future carees situation. And we also want to ask questions, for instance, of our carees, lawyers, and financial planners. One of the smartest things I ever did was ask my dad to introduce me to the important people in his life, which included his financial planner. And when I met his financial planner with my dad, I gained an insight into a couple changes we needed to do around their beneficiaries. It was incredibly helpful. And it helped us then as we continued during caregiving with thinking through their money. How do they want to disperse money after they die? It's really helpful. So I always think about asking for introductions to important relationships. And then the other conversations we can have could be with others in our life that might be a part of our caregiving experience. siblings, cousins, other family members. And then certainly those who are currently in a caregiving situation can be a great resource for us. What resources do you use? What services do you use? What's been most challenging? How have you managed those challenges? I'm curious, for those who are joining us live, who do you think is most important to ask questions of? You are welcome to share in the chat room. Who do you think? Okay. If we're going to start conversations about difficult other family members, thank you, Sharon. Yeah, I love that. And Sharon, share a little bit more in the chat room around the importance of sharing and asking questions with other family members. I think that's really important. When we're asking questions, we might be starting a conversation about an uncomfortable topic. So for instance, we often think about asking others about end-of-life wishes. And it's important for us to think through this regardless of how old we are. When I think about conversations with my own parents, I started asking my mom about her wishes for her funeral and end-of-life wishes a good 13 years before she died. But honestly, it wasn't until just a couple years before she died before she told me. She was the bereavement minister at her church. And she was the bereavement minister at her church for a good 20 years. So when I was asking her questions about her own funeral wishes, it was inspired by her conversation with me about planning funerals. And so I asked her, what's your wishes? And she was like, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to be here. Do what you want. It took me 13 years to really have a conversation with her where I understood what it was that she wanted. So Sharon's sharing the chat room. So asking other family members questions about a potential future caregiving situation includes understanding their availability, what they can do, what they can't do, and how to keep in touch, communication, and planning trips. Let's say the conversation is, I'm just curious, you guys, if mom ever has, you could even say it this way, it has to have a hip replacement. We need to help her out. I'm wondering if anybody would be able to come in and help out. So not a long-term commitment, but short-term, just to get the conversation started. Or mom and dad have lived in the same house for 40 years. I'm wondering what you guys think about when it might be time for them to sell. Who could help? What do we do? How do we manage? It's important to think about a conversation as really a process. We start the conversation, we might hit a brick wall. We say, okay, we've hit the brick wall, and then we take a break. And then we look for opportunities to talk about it again. And then we might hit another brick wall. We think, okay, another brick wall. It's the process that's most important, and committing to that process. I love to ask good questions. So think about, what can you ask? And I wanted to give you some ideas about what you can ask. We can ask for time. I need to get back to you on that. Can I tell you tomorrow what my decision is? Sometimes we feel the pressure to provide an answer or a decision right now. What if we asked for a little bit of time? What if we asked for space or ideas or information? In our certified caregiving consultant training program, which is a program for caregiving coaches, we use these conversation starters called caregiving wheels. And there's a wheel that goes with each keyword in each of the stages. And here is the wheel for the keyword ask. It's to help us think through, what could we ask about? And I like to think about having conversations about values. What's most important to you? What's the relationship that's most important to you? What's the hobby that's most important to you? What's the meal that's most important to you? Having that information now is so helpful when we need to reference it later. And the other piece of this is we're asking to start a conversation, but we're also asking to get into the habit of asking for help. And we know that asking for help is a challenge for all of us. We feel uncomfortable. We feel like we're putting ourselves in a position to be rejected. Who wants to do that? And we're going to talk about this as we go through the 6 stages. You might ask, have someone help, and then it's not help that helps. So then you think, well, I'm not going to ask anymore. Asking is a really great life skill to get into the habit of using. And it's why asking is part of the very first stage, the expectant stage, which is where we all are, regardless of how often and for how many we've cared for in the past. I did send out PowerPoints for you guys to download. If you didn't get them, I will share a link in the chat room so that you have these PowerPoints, that you have the PowerPoint. What's interesting is that the start of caregiving can happen for different reasons. It can happen because there's a diagnosis, and it could be that over a period of time, your family member has noticed some changes, goes to the doctor, gets a diagnosis. It could be because of a medical emergency, and that means it starts in a moment. It could be that just over time, an aging relative needs more and more help. For some, they feel like they move into the freshman caregiver. For others, they feel like they skip this and go right into stage 3 because it's a medical emergency. Regardless, you want to take out the keyword in this stage and keep it with you. Something else about the keywords is they actually are coping strategies. So ask becomes a coping strategy. We ask for more information. We ask for time. We ask for space. And find is another coping strategy. And I like to attach find to experimenting because I believe experimenting is an overlooked life skill. And in a caregiving situation, it's really hard to find the perfect solution. And if we release the idea that we're looking for perfect, we can instead step into looking to experiment, to just see what will happen. And because we're experimenting, we're going to pull out good information and insights that will help us as we tweak a solution or look for another. And if we're experimenting, we're not failing. And in a caregiving situation, sometimes it feels like we are failing every day. We're not enough. We haven't done enough. There isn't enough. And if we can release some idea of failure, it can help us cope as we move forward. We're going to experiment, try, see what works. And in this stage, you're also going to really connect to what do you enjoy most? Because you want to keep what you enjoy most. If you don't really enjoy it, but you've kept doing it because it's a habit, you can let it go. But you want to hold on to what you enjoy most. And if you get in the habit of holding on to it now, you'll have a better chance of keeping it as caregiving intensifies. So some suggestions about what to find. And if you have additional suggestions that you'd like to add to this bullet list, please post them in the chat room. Services that help. Again, not all services help. And the other piece of it is not all services help in this moment, in this situation, but they might be helpful down the road at another time during another situation. So if you experiment and see it's not right now the right fit, you'll have good information when it is the right fit. Support that comforts can be a challenge to find, and it's important to look for support that comforts. Because if you receive support that isn't comforting, it's not support, and it's okay to keep moving on until you find support that comforts. The support that comforts could be in a caregiving support group. It could be on a walk with your dog. It could be while you listen to music. You get to decide what it looks like when it's comforting. The other piece of this is we know this, we trust that the systems will take care of us until we realize that the systems aren't set up to take care of us. They are set up to take care of themselves. So once we figure that out, we know how important it is that we advocate and we speak out and speak up. When I was delivering this workshop last week, I asked the audience to just shout out their descriptors of the healthcare system. And someone said, a hot mess. And it is. And it's a hot mess because healthcare professionals don't have time or enough time to really walk us through what insurance coverage means, or what the next step in a treatment is, or to fully describe what's going to happen in a disease process. And so we can feel like we're chasing the healthcare professionals. And it's important for us to ask for clarification. If they tell us something that we don't think makes sense, and if they say we don't have time, then it's, where could I go to find more information? What's a link to more information? What's a brochure you can offer to me? Something else that can happen when we start to help is that we start to overhelp, which means that we might step in to take over rather than stepping in to talk out what could be helpful. With my parents, they were not going to hire help through a home care agency, no matter how much I tried. Oh my gosh, I tried. They really wanted it to be a family member that helped out. At one point, we had my niece. She was helping, and my parents were paying for her. And we do a planning session if you're thinking through what could it look like to hire family members. We do that every month, and you're welcome to join us. It's free. You can find more information about it on caringourway.com. So my niece worked for my parents until she couldn't. And then we needed to find someone to help out. My mom said, well, what about Matt? Now, Matt is my nephew. And at the time he was graduating from university. He had 3 months off until he started his master's program. I thought, what 22-year-old guy is going to want to come and help his grandparents, like cook and clean? And my mom loved when someone would do the windows. So he was always doing the windows. Anyway, so my mom said, I'm going to ask him. And I thought, okay. And sure enough, she asked him and he immediately said, yes, I would love to help. I will help. So he helped. Now, if it were left up to me, I would have dismissed it without even asking. But my mom was really good about advocating and asking, and she just always put it out there. So we had Matt help for the summer, and he helped a few years before my parents died. And then he came back to help when my dad was dying. My mom had died, actually, so my mom died the next year, and then my dad died 2 years later, a year after my mom. So Matt had availability when my dad was dying, and it was great to bring him back in because he understood my dad's quirks. And so it wasn't this huge, oh, this is what grandpa likes. Oh, I know it sounds crazy, but this is what we do for grandpa. He was like, okay, here I am. Just update me on what's new, but I'm good to go. And so for my dad, he was a big gin martini drinker. And when he was dying, we poured him a gin martini at 11 a.m. When he asked for it, we gave it to him. We didn't think anything of it. We just knew. And so that's was mad. He was like, yeah, I gave grandpa gin martini at 11:30 this morning. I'm like, okay. It actually was straight gin, to be honest with you. It had a whisper of vermouth, but it was straight gin. And I think someone else that would walk in might say, oh my gosh, you should be giving him gin, but it was his comfort. It was his quality of life. He didn't finish the martinis when he was dying, but we still made them for him because he had something that felt like normal everyday life, a drink. Okay, and then the other piece of this when you start to help is that you'll think everybody's going to jump in to help too, just like you, but they don't because they are missing an important gene that you have, and that is you are able to see when someone's in distress or struggling and to step in to help them. That is not a normal gift. That's an unusual gift. And so others might see someone struggling or in need of help and completely freak out. They might turn and run. They might freeze. They don't have your gift of being able to step in and say, okay, let's figure this out. So you might ask and they might say yes, and then they don't show up. And it's incredibly frustrating. It's horrifying at times. And they are showing you that they can't, which means that you want to look for others who can. And that could include others outside the family system who step in to help. It is painful when members of the family don't help. I have an older sister who, starting in 2015, did not help. So she did not help the last 8 years of my dad's life, the last 7 years of my mom's life. And she told us, don't reach out to me. I'm not helping you. She said it. We have text messages. It was awful. It was awful. It was really awful for my mom. It was heartbreaking for my mom, absolutely heartbreaking. And we were powerless to it. So we did the best to comfort my mom. I would say to my mom, she is not well, so we should pray for her. If she were well, she would be making a different decision. She's not well. Because it's hard not to take that personally. Okay, so some suggestions about what you can find. And I love the idea that we can find a way forward. And then here's our find wheel. What are we looking to find? Sometimes it is help. Sometimes it's information. Sometimes it's things like resilience or success. How can I be successful in this particular conversation, at this doctor's appointment, with this interview, as we look to find the right provider? And then we move into the entrenched stage. So this is when it's all about caregiving. We think about it, we worry about it, we manage it, we do it. And because it's all about caregiving, we are giving up time to caregiving. And I think it's important for us to think about what's our routine. If it's impossible to get a caree into a routine because of a disease process, then do what you can to put yourself into a routine. And a routine could be as simple as, this is when I get up in the morning. That could be a routine. This is what I get up in the morning and do next. I make coffee. That's a routine. And if that's all you can manage, you've managed a routine. Okay, so it's this idea of getting help when you can. And sometimes it can feel like the help isn't helping. And it's important that you use your wisdom around what's the help that helps. And if you know you need help and it's a struggle to get it, it could be that you take a little bit of a break because it's exhausting to try to find help that helps. And in that break, take care of yourself the best that you can, and then get back to it when you feel you have the energy to look for help that helps. Help that helps could be technology, it could be Google, it could be your neighbor, it could be walking to the grocery store to get a break from caregiving. Whatever helps is help. In addition, if you are trying to have your caree receive help and there is a ton of resistance to that, look to what could help you. Your caree refuses help, look to help what helps you. It could be that you say, okay, well, then I'm going to have to get a cleaning service for myself. I'm going to have to hire additional help for myself. I'm going to have to make an adjustment in something around your life in a way that helps you. And it's important to not get stuck into the idea that I have to sacrifice something. Bring in help for yourself so you can keep something, not give it up. Help is for your caree, help is for you. Could be very different types of help. One of my frustrations is sometimes people lump carees and family caregivers into one big category and think, well, it helps the caree, it helps the family caregiver. And I don't mean to say that it doesn't, right? What helped my parents also helped me, but it's also important to know that I was a very different person than my parents. And so the help that I needed was different than the help that they needed. Help is for you, help is for your caree. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's different. And be open to what helps you keep what's important to you. The last bullet item is respite in place. We started doing respite in place planning sessions every month during the pandemic. It might have been hard to bring in help during the pandemic, and it might have been impossible for your caree to go out to receive help through an adult day center, for instance. Respite in place is this idea that we create our own little space within our house, our yard, our community, that's just for us. Could be a corner of the bedroom, could be a garage. One of our certified caregiving consultants added a couch and a rug in her garage. And when her son was napping, she would go out into the garage with the baby monitor and just breathe. For me, it's our outdoor community pool. That's my respite in place space. There is an energy at the community pool because of young kids running around screaming. That's very different than the energy in caregiving. And it felt like, oh, it was alive again when I went to the community pool. This is important for us to keep in mind. We are the best family caregiver for our caregiving situation, but we're not the only one. So I would think through how my brothers and my younger sister could help. My older sister said, forget it, I'm not helping. Don't contact me. And she lived 5 minutes from my parents. 5 minutes would not help. My brother is a CPA, so I used him when there was a question of money. And I also used him when I needed to vent. I would call him up and say, oh, this is what just happened. And he always received it and he never freaked out. My younger sister would freak out anytime I told her something that was not going well. She just could not cope. It was too much for her. So I knew not to tell her, but I knew I could tell my brother. He helped me. He was a caregiver to me. I had a brother who died a year before my mom. Unfortunately, he died unexpectedly, and he was a caregiver to me too. He was very much about supporting me and helping me and honoring me. He was a caregiver to me too. And my younger sister, I finally figured out how she is a caregiver. She was the one that would come in to visit my parents and just sit and chit chat. When I was with my parents, I was doing work. I was getting things done. I was starting conversations that they would roll their eyes about. Oh no, here's another one. When Julie showed up, it was all fun. It was all about socialization. And I saw this happen when my mom was hospitalized in 2015. I would go to the hospital to chase down the doctors, to get all the information I could so that I could take care of decisions regarding my mom, make sure she was getting the right treatments. And then my sister would come and just visit with my mom. And I'd be like, oh, there's things to do. Why are we sitting? Why are you sitting? My mom said to me one day, you know, when you come, you work, which is good. And when Julie comes, she sits and visits, and that's good too. I thought, oh my gosh, I am totally overlooking and minimizing her contribution to this situation. She lightens us up. She brings in life. So from that day forward, when she would come to the hospital, we would sit with and visit with my mom, and I would make sure to just sit and visit. And then when my mom would fall asleep, I would go with my sister to sit outside and sit and chit chat. That's all. So she was a break for my mom, and she was a break for me. Okay. I want to mention something else too, and that is this idea that we have a tendency, I'm going to skip ahead just a minute, to go from one crisis to the other. And then when the crisis is over, we go back to our normal stressful day. We never give ourselves a chance to recover. I thought about this because of how stiff my body became during caregiving, because I was just this ball of stress, because I never gave myself a chance to recover from a stressful day, from a caregiving crisis. I was always just stressed. So the daily recovery plan helps us name what we're recovering from, a challenging conversation, and what we're recovering to, a silly reality TV show, because it's the exact opposite, right? So a challenging conversation about caregiving is very serious, very emotional. And if we watch a silly reality TV show, it's just all about surface and shallow. That's a total break, because we want to recover to catching our breath. There's a daily healing plan that I'm going to show you as we get through to the next few stages. Okay, so thinking through what can we receive? Again, I put success in several of these wheels because it seems elusive to us until we decide we can really define success in the way that works for us. What's a successful day? What's a successful moment? And for me, it always came down to when I was patient, I was successful. When I acknowledged what was hard for my parents, this is emotional, this is upsetting, this is really difficult, I felt like that was a success, because my ability to relate to them made everything that much easier. Sometimes I just kept powering through, and I thought, if I just take a moment and say, this is hard for all of us, it helped all of us. And then we move into the pragmatic stage. And it's not that caregiving is less stressful or less worrisome. It's just less of a shock to us. We get it. People say they're going to help and don't show up. We get it. The healthcare system is a mess. Because we're not so shocked and surprised by the elements of our caregiving situation, we can look at the relationships within our caregiving situation. And that's why welcome is the key word. I challenged myself on this one when I was really helping my dad, because I had a tense relationship with him. We had a lot of friction. We butted heads a lot. And I would get really upset, and I would think, I know I'm in the pragmatic stage. Why don't I feel better about caregiving? And then I realized we fight how we feel about caregiving when we're entrenched, because we think, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be so angry. Why am I so resentful? What is going on here? And then when we're in the pragmatic stage, we just realize, you know what? I need to welcome all the emotions of this experience. I can't fight the fact that I get angry, because that is a waste of my energy. Of course I'm angry. I have every right to be angry. I'm going to express it. I'm going to feel it. So we don't push it back. We just welcome it. So the good and the bad, the emotions that are good, the emotions that are bad, the experiences that are good and bad, the relationships that are good and bad, we welcome it. We don't resist and judge when we have a normal emotional response to a really trying and difficult and heartbreaking situation. And as we're moving through into the pragmatic stage, we are getting closer to the last stages. And that's when we really experience beginnings and endings. And I think if we get used to that earlier, we get used to the transitions around beginnings and endings. In this stage, we still might be tempted to say, no, I don't think I can. I'm not sure. And it's not necessarily saying yes to everything. It's saying yes as it relates to what's possible to as much as we can. Putting our life on hold, on the back burner, is not helpful for us now. And it won't be helpful for us tomorrow when we have to figure out, how do we take that off the back burner? It's so far back. I put it so far back, I don't know if I can reach it. We don't want to put our life out of touch. We want to keep our life within reach so it's accessible for us. It doesn't help us to put it on hold. So thinking through, what can you welcome? And it's good to dream. And if your dreams are just about you and no one else, it's good to dream just about you and no one else. This stage actually took me the longest to figure out. At first, and for many years, actually, I thought it was about the caree's transition, either to a different living environment or through end of life. And I was giving a presentation on the 6 stages in Winnipeg in January. It was very cold. And I was standing in front of this room full of family caregivers and healthcare professionals talking about that transitioning caregiver. And that's when it hit me. The transition isn't about our caree. It's our transition inspired by a caree's transition. And our transition is about doing to being. We are so used to doing, finding the better doctor, finding the better treatment option, finding the better provider, finding, getting, receiving. And then in this stage, as our caree gets closer to end of life, we're going to start to really just be with him or her. Hands-on care is still going to be intense, but we're not battling death anymore. That's the big piece. So in the doing, in many ways, we're battling death. We're trying to keep quality of life. We're doing what we can to keep our caree alive. That's a lot of our doing. And when a caree reaches a natural cycle of life, we transition to being. It's a very different way of showing up in the day. And it's a transition for us because we start to think, I should be doing more. And it's our ability to be that's most important. We might be more accepting that we've reached a caree's natural cycle of life than our caree or other family members. And I think of it this way. It's most important that we stay in the truth. It's okay if others are struggling in their process. We want to stay in our truth, keep moving forward. It's okay if they're behind us. We want to keep moving forward. We don't have to push them forward. We want to be aware and respectful of their process, and we want to keep moving forward because we don't want to get stuck back there when we want to be up here. So it's okay if you feel like it's just me leading the way. Reach out to us for support. It's okay if others are processing it at a different speed. In this stage, others might say to you, you need to take a break. You look like crap. People would say that to me. You look like crap. You need to take a break. And you know what? I couldn't. Wasn't right. You get to decide if it's the right time. The other transition is after our caree's death, we are transitioning to close out our caregiving experience. So there's endings and beginnings. Our caree has died, that's an ending. And then we're beginning the next stage of life while we close out caregiving. And the key word in this stage is to allow. And you can see how important it is to allow. And here's the daily healing plan. I think of the daily recovery plan for our body. The daily healing plan is for our heart. I'm healing through a tough day without my mom because I wanted to tell her about something that happened. So I'm going to heal with writing a letter to her. I'm going to send it to heaven because I want to heal to the relationship, enjoying the relationship that I had with my mom, even if it's in a different way. And then I think of the Godspeed caregiver as a stage that starts a couple years after caregiving ends, because we need that time to close out our caregiving experience. We also need that time to heal our body. Our body might be really sore after caregiving ends. We also need to adjust to not being on high alert, because we've been on high alert for years. And in this Godspeed stage, it's all about treasuring life, moments in life, relationships, our good health. We want to focus in on what can we do to enjoy good health, because we know good health is wealth. Just a couple thoughts for you as we close out our time together. We are going to have pity parties during our caregiving experience because there's a lot of reasons to have a pity party. And here's what I'll say about that. Have a pity party, but make sure you have an end to a pity party. You're going to find yourself on the couch with a big tub of ice cream, maybe a couple Big Macs, and Netflix. That's a pity party, and you've earned it. And you still want to get up and get out into life. Your life isn't in the pity party. You can take a break from life in your pity party and then get up off the couch. Your life is not on the couch. Okay. Just a reminder that we are challenged in ways during our caregiving experience that I think no other life experience challenges us. Every day we might wonder, am I enough? Am I doing enough? Did I do enough? And it's important for us to remember that every moment that we get up and fully participate in our caregiving experience, we are our bravest and most courageous. And as we look back after caregiving ends on our experience during caregiving, we are going to see that those moments were our bravest moments. One last thought, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions for those of you who are here live. I think that we might have a tendency to talk ourselves into waiting. Well, I'll just wait to have that conversation. I'll just wait. I'll just wait and see. And if you are tempted to wait, I would say instead, figure out a way to move forward. Could just be one little baby step that you take forward. The temptation to wait is a way that fear is telling you, oh, there's a risk out here. Stay back, just wait. If you wait too long, you are going to wait too long to get help and resources and support that you deserve. If you are tempted to wait, think instead, what's one little step I can take forward that will help me feel better? Could be a conversation you start. It could be a phone call that you make. It could be a resource you Google. Rather than wait, really think about, how can I step forward? Okay, if you have joined us live, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. What did you guys think?
Yes. Okay. Going downstairs.
Oh, I think I will mute you guys if. Yeah, there we go. So what questions might you have? And I also, Kathleen, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Oh my gosh, Kathleen, the last time I saw you was in Chicago at one of our conferences, I think. Oh my gosh. So that is a good 5 or 6 years. Oh my gosh. Wow. You never know who's going to show up for an event. It's good to see you. If any of you are thinking through what stage you're in, I'd love for you to either unmute or share in the chat room what stage you think you're in. And I also would love for you guys to think through, which stage do you think is most difficult? And if you are here for CEUs, I'm going to share the link. The CEUs, there's one CEU, and it's $20 for a CEU. And I'm going to share where you can pay for your CEU, and then you'll be directed to an evaluation. If you are not here for CEUs, please complete our evaluation. I'm going to put that in the chat room too. Okay. If you stage 2 or 3, the most difficult. Okay, that's interesting, Sharon. And you know what else? You reminded me of a question that people ask all the time. And that is, I'm in stage 3, I'm entrenched. I really want to get to the pragmatic stage. How do I get there? How do I get there? So we feel like we have to force ourselves into moving into the next stage. And I would say that you can be in any stage that you want to be. So for instance, if you feel like I am done with this entrenched stage, I really want to be in the pragmatic stage, you've just made the shift to the pragmatic stage. You are now in the pragmatic stage. There are so many things in our caregiving experience that we cannot control. Let's control what stage we're in, right? And if you feel like I'm done with that entrenched stage, then you can just say, you know what, I'm in the pragmatic stage. My keyword is to welcome, and that's the guide I'm going to use going forward. I'm going to think through, what can I welcome? And then you're in the pragmatic stage. Okay, I am going to stop the recording, but I'll invite those who are here live just to stay for another minute, just to make sure you have the right link for CEUs and workshop evaluation. And for those who are watching our archive, thank you so much for watching. We look forward to you completing the evaluation as well. You'll find all the information under your archive of your next steps. Okay.